College athletics is big business in the United States, but it hasn't always been that way. The NCAA basketball tournament, better known as March Madness, generates almost $800 million a year in television revenue, which CBS and Turner Entertainment parlayed into $1.13 billion in advertising revenue, including $83 million from a single sponsor, General Motors. Most so-called revenue-producing programs don't make money. They are subsidized by the university. Some Division I men's basketball programs that make it to the big dance show revenue figures around $3 to $4 million. But the top programs are quite lucrative. Last year, the University of Kentucky, for example, brought in $24 million in revenue. But again, it hasn't always been that way. College athletics was not created as a fundraiser for colleges or universities, or as a way for marketing universities. Originally, college athletics served as a form of recreation for students who sought recreation, and they quickly became a way for students at one university to compete for bragging rights against students at another university. The college sports that are currently most popular, football and basketball, didn't even exist when the first college sport programs were created. Basketball was created in 1891 by James Naismith, who was a faculty member at the YMCA training school in Massachusetts, now known as Springfield College. And football sort of evolved out of rugby when in 1880, Walter Camp convinced the other members of the Massasoit House to reduce the number of players from 15 to 11 and establish a line of scrimmage before each snap, which involved a transfer of the ball from the center to the quarterback. And football quickly grew in popularity. But the first college competitions occurred almost 3 decades earlier. Some of the students at the prestigious East Coast colleges, now known as the Ivy League universities, created rowing clubs. Since many of the students came from wealthy families, rowing was familiar to them. The first intercollegiate contest was a rowing competition between Yale and Harvard. The race occurred at a neutral location because a foresightful businessman arranged for his railway to transport the rowers, their gear, and their fans to the Central Harbor Resort in New Hampshire in order to get publicity for his rail line and the resort. So even the first intercollegiate competition had sponsors who saw an opportunity to promote their goods and services to the crowds drawn in by the competition. But from the beginning, college sports was considered co-curricular, part of education. Administrators were operating under the assumption that sport builds character and enhances the education of young men. Co-education hadn't really caught on at the time. Originally, administrators generally encouraged from afar, applauding outdoor pursuits like fishing and rowing as great ways to build a robust constitution. But these grown-ups weren't intimately involved in sport. They mostly looked down from their proverbial offices. In the early days of intercollegiate athletics, teams didn't even have a coach. Instead, teams were led by, and sometimes started by, a captain who was a member of the team, one of the students. But as college athletics started to attract fans, and as egos and economics began to play a bigger role in college athletics, colleges started to employ professional coaches. More often than not, these coaches were teachers, and football or basketball or baseball were just one of the subjects that they were paid to teach. For instance, before John Wooden became the head men's basketball coach at UCLA, his previous job involved teaching baseball and basketball and English. So his job, like most of his contemporaries, followed a teacher-coach model. But as egos and economics began to play an even greater role in college athletics, the role of a coach transitioned from a teacher-coach to an entrepreneur coach. And expectations changed. Instead of teaching several classes in addition to, say, baseball or basketball, the coach was expected to focus on building their program to the point that it was profitable or revenue neutral, or at the very least, not over budget. Currently, the cardinal sin for most coaches in most positions, not including Alabama football or Kansas basketball, is not losing. The cardinal sin is going over budget. In this respect, legendary Notre Dame football coach Knute Rockne was way ahead of his time. Rockne resigned from his position in the chemistry lab to coach the football team full-time. And he shrewdly learned that media exposure can do wonders for recruiting and fundraising. He was also one of the first coaches to transcend his sport to become a household name, building upon the celebrity status he had achieved as a football player. And Knute Rockne's career foreshadowed the future of college coaching, at least at the very top. Rockne is one of the men who paved the way for our current crop of elite coaches who are paid close to $10 million a year, with clauses in their contracts that allowed them to make even more money by negotiating their own contracts with shoe companies. And whereas the average student may have been required to take chemistry or English or physical education from the coaches of yesteryear, today the average student at an average large university has no relationship with the coaches whatsoever. And if they wanted to meet one of the coaches in a so-called revenue-producing sport outside of a public photo op, there would be at least one administrative assistant in the athletic office there to protect the coach from this inconvenience. Students started most of the first college sport programs, and they coached their peers in the first competitions. But those days are long gone. Now the average college student is more of a spectator, someone to be advertised to. And underfunded intramural and club sport programs now fill the needs of students who, like the Ormen at Yale and Harvard, seek more active forms of recreation.